Today we got an Arcanist XP farmer, both setups with a 1 bar or a 2 bar build. Check this out. What is going on, guys? It is Venom Surge here, and welcome back to another episode of Elder Scrolls Online. At this point, people are having Arcanist for a bit, and so I am showing off this build that will help you leveling at the end. If you do have the Oakensoul ring, once you're CP, this can be even faster at killing, but there is a 2 bar setup. It is a little more setup for your kills, but it still slaughters just as easily, and with that you can do at lower levels as well. But first, let's take a look at the gear. So first up, on the body pieces, we are using Dark Convergence. This comes from PvP. You don't actually have to do any PvP. You can get this just from buying it from the traders, or if you do a little bit of battlegrounds or general PvP, it can drop from rewards of the worthy. This will give you Magicka, penetration, and spell damage. We are Magicka focused for this Arcanist. And then casting an ability that leaves an AoE on the ground will apply a 60% snare, pulls in all enemies after 1 second delay, it'll stun them for a second, and then after 4 seconds it'll deal burst damage to all enemies in a 10-meter area, and this damage will increase by 50% for each target within that circle, and it can occur once every 25 seconds. This is a light armor set. We are using all training and max magicka on all the body pieces. As you can see here, on average it's doing about 25k damage, but sometimes even reaching up to 63k, so quite a bit of damage when you have a lot of enemies all together. Next up, we are using Camonna Tong. This is a new overland set from the Necrom DLC. You can get this from the Telvanni Peninsula. You can farm there or buy it from the traders. This is optional. You just want something that'll help boost up your weapon damage. Since we are all light, we don't get a lot of weapon damage. So this has 3 lines of weapon damage, and when you gain XP from a monster, it will give you 1 weapon damage for every 50 XP the monster is worth for 30 seconds, up to a maximum of 540 weapon damage. This is very easily to get. Just from one group of nuking down ads, you get about 8,000 XP, which is 160 weapon damage already, so you just need to do about 5 groups on average. About 27,000 XP is how much you need to get to the maximum. We're using this on the ring and necklace, all Bloodthirsty with the Magicka version of spell damage. 1 piece on the shoulders, and then a lightning staff with training, and then a weapon damage enchant. Now, this is using the mythic Oakensoul that came from the High Isle DLC. This will give you a lot of buffs, as you can see here. I'm not going to read out every single one of them, but that will help you get a lot of extra damage out. So because of that, that's why we had to wear the shoulder, which means we're just using a 1 piece of Slimecraw just to get a little more crit chance. This doesn't have to be Slimecraw, but you do want to try and get some crit chance going. We are a little low on that, but I'll explain that later. And then guys, if you do have Mora's Whispers, if you're on a character that has already collected a lot of lore books, Mora's Whispers will give you an additional up to 15% XP when you're killing monsters, so that can help you burst out even more levels, but you will have to replace your Oakensoul instead, since it is a mythic. So taking a look at the stats here, unbuffed, we get about 31.4k mag, about 20k health, and about 14k stam. We do have 1700 mag recovery and 800 stam recovery. The stam does get low sometimes, so you might want to boost that up with some food, get some max magicka and stam food. We are sitting around 4.6k spell damage unbuffed. Like I said, we are low on crit. We only get about 39%, but that is because of our penetration. We do get about 8.9k penetration. You do want to focus penetration because we are trying to nuke down ads. They're not going to be debuffed like a boss is from a tank. so you will want to get through their armor. So with this and other buffs, we do get about 15k penetration, which is going to basically mitigate all their armor. So that is why we do want to push up the crit a little bit. You could replace the training on your staff with precise if you want to push that up more, or put on some divines rather than training. And then we get about 20k spell resist and 16k physical resist. If we buff up here, we do get about 5.3k spell damage. That does go a little over 6k when we do get all of the weapon damage from our Camonna set. And our mag recovery goes up to 2044 and stam recovery goes up to 1k. And then as far as our Mundus, I am using the Thief Mundus Stone. You could use the Lover if you wanted to drop some of that crit chance and get more penetration. However, I figured we are already at enough penetration. And now for the consumables, we are just using tri-stat potions to gain resources back. I don't really need to use this. The only time I do is for stam, if that gets low, or if I start taking a little bit of a beating. And then for our food, we are using Ghastly Eyeball. This is giving us max mag and mag recovery. That's where I said if you wanted to use Crunchy Spider Skewer, that would give you max mag, and then stam recovery, that would probably be better than this. And now for the skills. First up, from the Herald of the Tome, we are using Cephaliarch's Flail. This is a stamina ability that is cast in a carpet in front of you. When you hit this, it deals damage to all enemies, it'll heal you, and generate Crux, which we are not really using on this 1-bar build. And then enemies are immobilized for 3 seconds. They're marked with Abyssal Ink, which lets you deal 5% more damage to them. And this acts as an execute. This is the same strength as Spin to Win. This actually does a little bit more base damage than Spin to Win, so it does more, but it is not behind you or to the sides of you. So you do want to stand back from the group a little bit when you are using this, but this will act as our AoE execute. Next up, in the Fighters Guild line, we're using Ring of Preservation. It is mainly just here for passives unless you do need some healing. When you hit this for stam, it'll put a little rune on the ground for 10 seconds. It'll grant you minor protection. That'll reduce our damage taken by 5%, and it'll heal us every second while we're standing in it. Next up, from the Psijic line, we are using Channeled Acceleration. We are mainly using this for the speed that it gives us. It gives us Major Expedition for 12 seconds. We already get the Minor Force from the Oakensoul Ring, but that'll increase our movement speed by 30%. We use this in between trash packs. And then from the Destro Staff line, we're using Pulsar. Since we are using a lightning staff, it is Storm Pulsar. When we hit this, it'll deal an AoE around us by 6 meters, and it'll apply a minor mangle to the enemies, reducing their max health by 10%, which means we can just nuke them faster. But it also increases the damage done by 5% for each enemy hit up to 6 times, so that is 30% extra damage as long as you have that many enemies. Next up, from the Assault line, we are using Razor Caltrops. We are using this to proc our Dark Convergence. This counts as our AoE skill. Ring of Preservation does as well, so you will want to be careful on when you use that, since that is placed on you. That can proc your Dark Convergence, so you don't want to do that before your attack. But when we hit this, it'll put out an 8-meter radius on the ground at range, and it'll reduce the movement speed of enemies inside by 50%, and they will take Major Breach, which gives us another 6k penetration. That is partly how we get to about 15 to 17k penetration. For our front bar ultimate, we don't actually use this. This is just here for passives. We are using Flawless Dawnbreaker. If you do decide to use this, it will deal a conal attack in front of you, dealing a massive amount of damage up front, and then it will deal additional DOT over 6 seconds. And then after you cast it, you will gain an additional 300 spell damage for 20 seconds. After I show you guys how the rotation works on this, I will go over the 2-bar setup in case you guys don't have Oakensoul or if you just want to do 2 bars. As far as the champion points, this is both the same for the 1 and 2-bar builds, so you won't need to change anything here. In the green tree, most people already do this, but I just want to make sure. In the green tree, you will want to get Steed's Blessing. This will give you 20% movement outside of combat, which is really needed for moving in between trash packs. As far as in the blue tree, first up we are using Wrathful Strikes to give us 200 more spell damage for our damaging abilities. Overcult Overload, this is a massive thing that is helping nuke down everything. Because we are an Arcanist, we get some extra passives that I'll go over after this. But when you kill an enemy that's under a status effect, they will explode for 5.2k Oblivion damage. and it will hit everyone in a 4-meter radius around them, and it will apply a random status effect to each enemy hit. So this will just cause a chain explosion as long as you're killing things, and it can occur once every second. This is a very powerful CP node. Next up, we are using Fighting Finesse just to get an extra 8% crit damage when you are fighting them. During my testing, I accidentally had Backstabber on, which is completely useless when you're solo. Everyone is facing you, and I'm not able to flank anyone. Fighting Finesse will be better off there. And then lastly, we're using Reaving Blows. This is our main heal. We do have the Arena Preservation if you need a manual heal as well as your potion, but this will do most of your healing for you. When you deal direct damage, you just heal for 8% of the damage done, which is a lot when you're dealing with like a 69k hit from Dark Convergence. And then in the red tree, we're using Fortified for more armor, Boundless Vitality for more health, Bloody Renewal to get 1500 stand back when we kill an enemy, and Siphoning Spells to do the same for Magicka. And now for the passes. I'm just going to cover the passes that'll help us nuke everything down. You will want to get the passives everywhere else that will help benefit your build overall in other content. But for this, Fated Fortune usually matters on your Arcanist. However, with the 1-bar setup, we just don't have enough room to really take care of this. It would give us an additional 12% crit damage whenever we generate or consume Crux. However, we only have a Crux generator. We don't have a consumer. If we did have a consumer, then you could keep this up at all times, but once you hit your maximum of 3 Crux, this stops activating because you're not generating anymore. So that's where this is kind of useless for the 1-bar setup. Next up, we are using Harness Quintessence. Every time we restore resources, our spell damage is going to be increased by 5% for 10 seconds. And then Psychic Lesion, this is why we're using Overcult Overload in the CP. We deal 15% more damage with our status effects, and our status effects chance is increased by an additional 75%. So Arcanists are the best at putting out general status effects of all types, and with having all the different types of damage, this will be helping us a lot to make sure Overcult Overload is going to be proccing. And then Splintered Secrets, just for having our Cephaliarch's Flail slotted, we're going to gain almost 1k extra penetration. Now, because we're using a Destro Staff, Trifocus is going to help us deal 100% of our damage when we heavy attack enemies, which you will want to heavy attack enemies to aggro them, which I'll show later. We also want Penetrating Magic. This will make it so our Pulsar will ignore 10% of the enemy spell resistance. And then we will want Elemental Force. This will give us another 100% chance to gain a status effect on the enemies. And then Ancient Knowledge. This will increase our damage done with AoE abilities by 10%. And then Destruction Expert, once you do kill an enemy with Pulsar, you will gain an additional 3600 Magicka. Now, like I said, we are mainly light armor, so this will help us with Grace. This will reduce the cost of sprint, so we can get in between adds faster by 18%. And then Evocation's massive. It'll give us 24% mag recovery and reduce the cost of mag abilities by 12%. Spell Warding will give us an additional 4k resists, which helps depending on the place you are fighting at. And then Prodigy will give us a lot more crit chance for each light armor equipped, and Concentration will give us our penetration for having light armor. Now, since we do have that one piece of Camonna Tong, we do get one piece of medium, so this will help give us 2% more crit damage from Dexterity. Windwalker will give us more stam recovery and reduce the cost of stam abilities. Agility will give 2% more weapon damage. And then Athletics is also nice. This will increase our movement speed bonus by 3% and reduce the cost of roll dodge by 4%. From the Fighter's Guild ability, you will want to get Slayer. This will increase your spell damage by 3% per Fighter's Guild ability slotted. That is why we have Flawless Dawnbreaker and Arena Preservation. That will give us 6%. You also want Banish the Wicked. This will make you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy, as long as a Fighter's Guild ability is slotted. Now, we are a Khajiit. This will give us all resource recoveries and all max resource by 915. And then Feline Ambush will give us an additional 12% crit damage. And then in Alchemy, you will want to get Medicinal Use to make your potions last 30% longer, which will give you 100% uptime. Now, as far as our setup here, so let's say this is your trash pack. This is quite a bit. You don't need to have channeled acceleration on. We already get our minor force from that, but you might already have it on from the other trash pack you were at. You might be sprinting on over here. So when you first get to here, you will want to throw out your caltrops. This will cause Dark Convergence to activate, so everyone will be pulled in if they weren't a target like that. But they'll all get pulled in into a general area. Caltrops will also give them that major breach. And then once you're in here, you can start storm pulsing. Usually I only need to do one. If it's a general ad, you just need to do one of these. That will get all of them down to low health. And then you can step back and just tentacle arm them, and that will get them all dead. If they somehow do survive, you got Dark Convergence on top of that, so it will kind of burst them down. You can see here in the footage when that happens. But yeah, with this setup, it is a very quick and easy pull everyone in and just nuke them down. There's only 2 skills you really need to focus on, and you just use your channeled acceleration to go from group to group. Now, like I said, if you don't have Oakensoul, there is a 2-bar setup. So with this, we will put on the Slimecraw shoulder. So we get the 2 pieces Slimecraw. This will give us a minor berserk at all times, increasing our damage done by 5%. And then we'll just put on the Camonna Tong down there. And as far as our weapons, on the front bar, you will have your same lightning staff with training and weapon damage enchant. And then on your back bar, we are using another Camonna lightning staff with training and then a flame enchant. Now with this, because we have more room and options, there's an additional skill that will really help you in combat. I wish I could have put it on the 1-bar setup, however, there was just not enough room. On the front bar, we only have 2 skills that are actually changed here, and the first one is Camouflaged Hunter. This is here just for passives. We are using this to get Major Prophecy, which will increase our spell damage while it's on our front bar, and we already get the minor berserk, so that is wasted there. Next up, we're using Rune of Displacement from the Herald of the Tome skill line. So when you hit this, it'll place a debuff on an enemy, and then after 2 seconds, it will pull in all enemies within 2 to 8 meters. That is almost the same length as Dark Convergence. Dark Convergence is 10 meters. Now with this, when it says pull in, it does it better than Dark Convergence. When Dark Convergence pulls in its enemies, they actually look similar to how these guys are. They're still pulled in tightly, but they're not like stacked on top of each other. Whereas this skill will actually make it so that way they are all directly on top of each other, which really helps to get your Cephaliarch's Flail to hit every single one of them. After they get pulled in, they get a dot, and an ally can synergize if you have someone with you. We use this when Dark Convergence is off cooldown. So we go back and forth between these 2, whereas with the 1-bar setup, you have to wait your 25 seconds, so every other fight, depending on where you're at, you're not going to have Dark Convergence ready. Now, on your back bar, first up from the Curative Rune forms, we're using Tidal Chakram. This is our consumer for our Crux. We don't actually use this during the fight though, we use it in between. So when you hit this, it applies a damage shield to you for 6 seconds, and it can go up to 4 other allies, but it'll consume Crux and it'll heal you for 33% of the shield's remaining strength every second. So for me, it's already an 8k shield. The heal can crit, so you can get like a 15k heal every second. It is a very powerful heal. But because it's our consumer, what we end up doing is we consume it before we enter the fight, so we have no Crux. Once we enter the fight, when we hit our Cephaliarch's Flail, we'll gain that Crux, so we get the 12% extra crit damage that the Fated Fortune passive gives us. On the back bar, we are using Camouflage Hunter again, and then next up we are using the Silver Leash, once again from the Fighter's Guild ability. If there are ranged enemies, you can use this to pull them in and get everyone nice and tight if they didn't get pulled in by Dark Convergence or your Rune of Displacement. Next up, we are using Inspired Scholarship. So this you don't really have to use unless you're wanting to generate Crux. When you hit this, it'll enhance your Arcanist abilities every 3 seconds, and it'll deal additional damage when you hit your class abilities. But it will generate Crux only if you have no existing Crux. Now, while this is slotted, you gain major sorcery and brutality, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 20% on either ability bar. So I mainly am using this for the passive for the sorcery. But the issue is sometimes the enemies die before you can hit Cephaliarch's Flail, and it is nice to have that crit damage right away. So what I do is I will hit your Inspired Scholarship, so then I could use Rune of Displacement. When I use Rune of Displacement, it gives me that crux, so now I have that crit damage, and things will die before that runs out. Or you could hit your Cephaliarch's Flail ahead of time, however you're not getting that execute damage, and it would have been better to use Storm Pulsar. And then we just moved the Razor Caltrops to the back bar instead here to proc your Dark Convergence. And then for the ultimate on the back bar, you don't have to use this. I never did during my thing, but it can help out a lot if you have a lot of enemies. Shooting Stars from the Mage's Guild line, when you hit this, it'll deal a massive amount of damage to all enemies in a 5-meter radius, and it'll knock them down and stun them for 2 seconds. After impact, they take a massive amount of damage every second for 13 seconds, and you will generate 12 ultimate for each enemy hit by the initial blast. So you could pull them all in with Rune of Displacement and then hit them with this. You're pretty much guaranteed to get your ultimate back if you have a lot of enemies in there. However, I was not doing that. I just preferred using my normal setup. So with this, it's a little more complicated since we do have 2 bars going on. Now, because we don't have the Oakensoul Ring, we will want to make sure Channeled Acceleration is on at all times so we get that minor force. So now when we're coming into a fight, if you do want to use your Dark Convergence and you want to rely on that, what you can do is you start with Caltrops on your back bar. Once you've aggroed everything, throw that out, swap to your front, and then they'll be all pulled in. You can start spamming your Pulsar and your Cephaliarch's Flail, and they'll all be dead. Let's say your Dark Convergence is on cooldown, like right now. I can't get it to proc. So then what I would do, I would hit Inspired Scholarship just so I can generate my 1 crux that I don't have yet. Go to the front bar, hit your Rune of Displacement. That'll give me my 1 crux, so now I have Fated Fortune on. Everyone will be in a very tight position, and then you can start Pulsaring and Cephaliarch's Flails. Now you won't have that Dark Convergence burst, however, like I said, most people do just die anyways from the Pulsar and the Flail, so that won't matter as much. And like I said, once you're done killing those packs and you're on to your next people, make sure to hit your shield to get rid of all of your crux. So guys, this is with my setup of the 1 bar abilities. So as you can see here, our Dark Convergence on average was doing about 27k up front. That is a massive amount. Our Stone Pulsar is doing about 13k. Cephaliarch's Flail is around 14 to 15k. Overcoat Overload's always going to be doing about 5k per person. Everything else we're not really worried about as far as damage because it is just those 4 that are our nukers. As you can see, we do get to about 6.3k spell damage, and we can almost get to 18k. However, that is because we don't have a guaranteed source of minor breach, so that is where we're kind of losing out on our penetration. So this is a fight here with the 2 bar setups. As you can see, our max spell damage does get lower than the 6.1k I think it was. Our crit chance does go up to 51% rather than 40%, so that is much better there. Our penetration's still about the same. Here you can see Dark Convergence did pull them in, however they all got nuked before the main burst, so there is no actual damage of the burst here because our Storm Pulsar just nuked them down that quickly. We take a look at our health here, like we're doing fine pretty much all the time. This is a massive pull here, as you can see, so there is a lot of people beating on me, and it lasted about 20 seconds, so that's a lot of time for them to try and get me, and the lowest I got down to was like 86%, so not a big deal there at all. For our mag and stam, as you can see, our stam does get lowered to about like 65%, so stam's more heavily used than our mag in this case. So I mean, here you can see, like when we were testing on the target skeletons, when I was giving the demonstration on how to start up, Dark Convergence really does a lot of work for you. I mean, 81k on average per person, like that's a lot. So in a lot of cases, Dark Convergence alone can just take care of the group. I tested in a few locations. In the Alakir Necropolis, there's a little loop here that you run. In there, this build was basically perfect for looping around. There's only a few times where I had to actually like wait for quite a bit for them to all spawn. Other than those few times, I'm entering right as they're spawning, so it's at a perfect rotation. And the Camonna Tong is great at staying up for that, since you're not having to wait. That is the one downside with this set, is if you are having to wait, you will lose your stacks. Every time you get a kill though, it will reset, so you might just want to try and leave a few stragglers every now and then. Earlier I had went to Spellscar, as you can see here, nuking everything down. However, they take quite a bit to respawn because usually there's multiple people that you're trying to fight with. Here when I went there, I was nuking them down so quickly that I had to wait for quite a while for them all to respawn, at quite a few minutes actually, so I had lost all my stacks every single time I had to run that. So I would not recommend this set if you are trying to do something like that. You might just want to use something that will give you either a flat amount or something that's more easily procced for more burst damage. So guys, if you are using the 1-bar build and you do want to use the Rune of Displacement to help pull in more enemies, if you don't want to use Dark Convergence or if you're waiting on its cooldown, you could replace Pulsar. Pulsar does about the same amount of damage as your Cephaliarch's Flail. However, the only benefit to it is it's a full 360 around you, whereas Cephaliarch's Flail is only in front of you. So if there are enemies off to your sides, you will have to back up and aim at them in a general location versus just standing next to them and hitting that. You could also just swap to dual wield. That will let you use spin to win, so you can have an AoE around you. However, it won't reach as long as Cephaliarch's Flail, so that really helps when you're dealing with ranged people who are low. And the other thing with that is it will be more difficult to aggro people, because you will need something ranged if you are using dual wield, especially if you're using the 1-bar. It's going to be even harder. As far as aggroing goes though, since we are using lightning staff, you don't want to light attack. That takes time for it to get to that person. So as you can see here, I just hit it, there it got to them, so it takes quite a while, whereas if you heavy attack or medium attack, it's instant. So if you're trying to aggro people to get into groups, as you can see in all of my footage here, you just want to medium weave. You don't need to go through an entire heavy attack, just like hold it down for a few seconds, make sure it damaged them once, and then you can just move on to the next people, so that way it's a faster way to aggro people. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you guys want to see more of this content. If you guys have any other classes that you would like me to try and make a farming XP build out of, just let me know down in the comments. If there's any other unique sets that you guys think might be cool in a build, or you're interested in trying out even though it may not be meta, let me know down in the comments. I love making non-meta builds. They're always more fun to me, and trying to make them work even with the weirdness with it, such as my Pelinal's Wrath build that I made about a week ago. So guys, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you guys next time.